The second night of the Democratic National Convention picked up where the first left off, as speakers praised the party's now presidential nominee, Joe Biden, as a trustworthy and empathetic leader. Two former presidents, activists, and even some lifelong Republicans offered an optimistic view of the nation's future should Biden win the general election. Let us bring in Joel Payne and Lauren Claffey to talk about what happened last night. Joel is a CBS News political contributor and a Democratic strategist, and Lauren is a Republican strategist and the former Deputy Assistant Secretary for Strategic Communications and Public Affairs at the Department of Homeland Security. Good to see both of you. So, Joel, let me begin with you. The DNC featured several up-and-coming Democratic politicians from across the country last night. Is the party effectively using this convention to present itself as a gateway for young leaders and to showcase the party's ideological diversity?
Oh, absolutely, 1,000%. And I think they're doing a pretty good job of it. Just that roll call last night really reflected the diversity of the party, not just, gender and race diversity, but really geographic diversity. The dream for every party is to be able to reflect a 50-state strategy, to have tentacles into every part of the country. And I think the convention has been able to do that for Democrats so far. And I think you're going to continue to hear these diverse voices tonight and tomorrow in the name of our vice presidential candidate, Kamala Harris, who is a historic candidate herself, and then some of the folks who are going to be telling those stories about what the Biden-Harris administration will bring to the country.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty remarkable, that roll call, and I just asked the chairman of the Democratic Party about that. But let me ask you, Lauren, this convention is also featuring a lot of regular Americans and their stories as opposed to the traditional standard political speeches. Is that a strategy that could resonate with Republican voters perhaps next week at the RNC?
It is, because the Republicans have actually said that they're already going to be bringing in for their convention less party leaders, less elites, less people who in this kind of populist moment that we're having are viewed as, in control or what have you, and just really people that are impacted by government policies in an everyday way. And so, I think that's the beauty of these events being virtual, is you really do have a lot more opportunity to bring folks in who might normally not be at the conventions or be able to travel to the conventions like the party leaders. And so the Republicans have indicated that they really want to tell everyday American stories. And I think that's always more effective in political discourse.
Joe, we saw two former presidents speaking last night. Former President Jimmy Carter, who delivered an audio-only speech. He is 95 years old. Hats off to President Carter. But we also saw former President Bill Clinton took on a smaller role last night than in years past with just a 5-minute speech. Why do you think the Democrats chose to include President Clinton? There are some problems now in 2020 with President Clinton for a lot of Democrats. And, in the past, I get that he's had a larger role in the conventions, but do you think his messaging was effective last night?
I think that the convention has done a good job of figuring out the appropriate time slot, the appropriate amount of time for all of the speakers, including President Clinton. I think you're always going to be nostalgic to presidents past. That's why you had Carter, you had Clinton. Obviously, you're going to have President Obama this evening. But I do think that you do have to recalibrate as time adjusts. And look, there are going to be things about the Clinton years, forget about the person himself, right? But what his administration was all about that you're going to want to reflect. And that is reflective of what Democratic values are. Things like balanced budgets and making smart decisions, 8 years of peace and prosperity. I think those are things that you want to talk about. And I think that's why it's important to make sure that you're being inclusive of all of those voices.
Lauren, based on some of the things that we've seen over the past 2 days at the Democratic convention, what would you expect Republicans to address next week in their convention? I mean, the country is facing enormous challenges, and there will be some, particularly independents, who are trying to figure out what they should do come election day. And I wonder how Republicans appeal to them, more importantly, because, as you know, the base is always going to be there. They're going to turn up no matter what. But successful campaigns are run by widening the tent and bringing in more people than just the base. And so that's something that the president has struggled to do over the past 4 years.
Yeah, the party conventions, first and foremost, are there to energize the base, like you just said. It's very important that you get high numbers of turnouts in places where you are already established. And I think that next week you're going to see that. You're going to see a lot of traditional Republican conservative themes, law and order, Second Amendment rights, First Amendment, everything like that, anti-abortion speaker that's going to be out there. So you'll hear all of those common themes. And then, as you mentioned, it is important to target people that may be independent or be leaning Republican and bring them into the fold. And I think you will hear an appeal to them, especially in battleground states where they are extremely concerned about the security and some of the more radical tax and spend policies that the Democrats have been proposing. Joe Biden's tax policy will raise taxes on 80% of Americans. Those types of themes are going to be what you hear to create a contrast between Republican policies that work to build the economy and Democrats' more liberal policies that they've been promoting this past week.
There's a new CBS Battleground Tracker poll that found Democrats are less enthusiastic about voting than Republicans this year, Joel. Why do you think that is, and what can the party do to change that?
Well, poll analysis is my favorite thing. You know, I worked on the Hillary Clinton campaign in 2016, and I did advertising, and I spent a bunch of time looking at polls and trying to figure out what's what. And I think polls are good for overall sentiment, but I don't think they always tell the full story. Here's what I know. Joe Biden won this past fall with record numbers in places like South Carolina and places across that SEC primary across the South. Democrats run with record numbers, Obama-level numbers in New Hampshire and in Iowa, in Nevada, right? You had record turnout. So that is a better reflection of enthusiasm to me. And every Democrat I talk to is very enthusiastic about voting Donald Trump out on November 3rd.
All right. Joel Payne, Lauren Claffey, always great to talk to you both. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.